Hi, and welcome to another screenwriting roundtable for the 2023 Die Laughing Film Festival. We are joined by three very talented screenwriters. I will have them introduce themselves as well as their screenplay, and then I'll probably have a couple of questions for them so that we can get a little bit more about information about their process or their project. Bill, why don't you start us out with introducing yourself and your screenplay.
Okay. So you want a brief synopsis of this thing.
Yeah, and who you are.
Okay. My name is Bill Blaney. The script that I submitted is called Without a Clue. And I guess the brief log line for it would be two life losers find redemption when their ex-prom queen is kidnapped from their 15-year high school reunion.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll give you a little more detail on this, not too much. But it's essentially a story about Cliff and Alan. Cliff is a 32-year-old man, lives at home with his mother, and has delusions of being a detective. He's had this since high school. His dad was a detective. His dad is no longer with us. And when you first meet him, he's actually barged in on a neighbor who he thinks a crime is being committed. But in actuality, it's just two neighbors who are having an affair, and they're dressed up as Ernie and Bert outfits. He's in Bert standing up. She's as Ernie, tied to the bed with an apple in her mouth. And, there's really no excuse as to why, a little person stumbles out in an Elmo outfit and wants to know when they're going to start. But anyway, this is where you first meet Cliff. And the police show up, and sure enough, they know him because this has happened before. And the detective there was a friend of his dad's and more or less tells him, says, Cliff, you can't keep doing this. You're not a detective. But this constantly happens. He's like Chicken Little. After that, you meet Alan. Alan is the polar opposite of Cliff. They were actually friends in high school, but they had a really bad falling out. Where Cliff is sort of naively optimistic, Alan is negative. He thinks the world's after him, and he thinks he's just invisible. And when you meet him, he's on a train coming back home for the reunion. A couple of girls even come in talking to each other. They sit down. One sits on his lap. And, the reason being is she says, I didn't even see you there. So anyway, due to unforeseen circumstances, the two of them end up having to carpool to this thing, bickering the whole way. They get to the reunion, and they both go their separate ways. Alan, as it turns out, ends up getting in a conversation with Mandy, who was the ex-prom queen, and they really sort of hit it off. And just as he's about to get her number to see if she wants to go out afterwards, a bunch of guys in ski masks with guns come into the gym, start shooting the place up, and kidnap her. Now, Cliff sees this, and he knows this is his moment. So he chases after him. Alan goes after him, too, because he's got something at stake here. And the two of them follow him in the van. There's a chase. They lose him, but they end up at the police station later, and Mandy's mother shows up with a note from the kidnappers, a message. The police can't make out any details of it, but Cliff actually does. He hears something in the background there that he recognizes. So he decides he's going to go on his own and go after and get her. And Alan follows through. And this is pretty much the first, 24, 30 pages of the script.
Yeah, that's the setup. Great. Thanks, Bill.
That was awesome. But I'm about to tap out because that was so good. I'm just like, okay, well, I'm going to stumble through mine.
No, that's not true.
It's great.
Just going in order.
I do this for a living. I'm a creative director, so I always have to get.
Yeah, you're really good at it.
Oh, thank you.
Going in order of just around the order of my screen. Brian, why don't you introduce yourself in your screenplay?
Oh, sure. My name is Brian W. Smith. I'm from New York City, and my screenplay is Ladykiller. It's about a single woman in New York who becomes romantically involved with a charming, handsome, quirky stranger who happens to hide a bloodthirsty secret. The short pitch is it's Fright Night as a rom-com. I grew up on the 80s, 90s horror films. I love vampires. I love scary vampires, sexy vampires. And I feel like we haven't seen those in quite a while. And so that was basically the idea, the genesis of the story. I wanted to make something that was both scary, but kind of quirky and funny. And as I was writing it, I noticed that it was sort of structured like a rom-com. It wasn't exactly, that wasn't the actual idea behind it initially. It was just sort of structured and sort of the meet cute and everything. And I realized, oh, I'm just going to lean in on that, and that's how it went. But there's definitely some more of a sort of a scream element to it, in that it has the humor, but it's when it has to be deadly serious, it's scary and hopefully pretty interesting and intense. And yeah, just influence. It's just a hodgepodge of just an influence of all the stuff that affected me growing up watching horror films and vampire films in particular, and just wanted to bring that back in a sort of meta sort of way.
Great. Thanks, Brian. And finally, but last but not least, Jesse, tell us about your project and a little bit about yourself, please.
Okay, well, I'm Jesse Dorian. Currently in San Antonio, Texas. I don't know about for how much longer, but my screenplay that was selected is it's called As Scared as You, and it's psychological horror, suspense thriller, graphic horror, dark romance, dark drama, mystery. It's a 20-something, basic synopsis is 20-something male drifter is an anti-hero, and a young blind woman become caged prisoners at a bed and breakfast in small town Northern California. It's like it's called Felton, which is a random town I've actually been through before. But anyway, it's where the drifters' violent, malignant actions prior push a group of malicious locals along with their two animalistic basement-held zombified residents who happen to be dressed as a dog and a clown to seek vengeance against this malicious sexual predator who is he's put in essentially a protagonist position, which is a challenge to get the audience to feel something for somebody like this, and like, why would you do that? And I like challenges like that personally, to kind of humanize someone like that, even though they're still bad, but these other people are even worse. And with a wild card with this young blind girl that he makes a personal connection with, and I explore that a bit with that concept. This is a story I wrote 10 years ago and revised numerous times. And this was before Don't Breathe. This was before Barbarian, which has been compared to Barbarian, and way before those movies is when the initial concept I came up with. Yeah.
Great. Very good. So the question I want to pose to all three of you, and if you can answer briefly, particularly how it relates to this particular project, is just about the idea of genre and how important is genre in terms of your writing, your style. What is it about genre that influences you or that you kind of back away from or you avoid? But just this general idea of how you see your work in the broader umbrella of genres. Whoever wants to go first can go first.
Oh, okay. Well, I consider this screenplay a genre hybrid, in that it's a lot of things. It's a matter of how you sell it or how you pitch it. I mean, right out the gate, I would say it's definitely a horror movie, but there's a lot more going on beneath the surface of just a horror film. It is a dark comedy, also something that's kind of impossible for me to escape in a lot of my movies. There has to be some edge of comedy. Some are more comedic than others. This one, again, some people might see the humor in it even more than I do. That seems to be a lot of consistently I get that reaction. But it's also, in a weird way, it's a quirky love story about two misfits who don't really connect with anybody, and but then they're held captive, and they're already past that stage of they don't have to learn to trust each other. They kind of already do, and that's established early. But anyway, trailing off. Yeah, but like I think it doesn't really fit into a particular niche of genre in that sense.
Great. Brian or Bill, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, sorry. Did you want to?
No, go right ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I pretty much love the horror genre from a young age. So I've been writing horror for years and years and years, and I'm fine with getting pigeonholed in that. I like having fun within the genre. I like knowing the conventions and knowing that if a reader reads it, that I understand that they're smart enough, they're going to know the conventions as well. So it's a fun challenge to sort of go against the conventions while adhering through, you sort of lay them in there and then sort of twist them for a more contemporary reader, contemporary age. And yeah, there's a lot of humor in the script, but there's humor in a lot of my scripts. And actually, I think I'm a returning screenwriter because I had a feature script Flag Day a couple of years back that I co-wrote, but and that was a horror comedy. But in this case, the comedy comes from, it's just realism. It's just, I think even in a drama, you need some levity to really identify with the characters, and it's how you put your characters in particular situations. How do they respond? And that's where the humor comes out. It's not necessarily jokey or slapsticky,
Right.
but I think for me, the humor always endears me to a character so that I don't want to see them get killed. That's how I feel every time a new Scream movie comes out. It's like whenever they're announcing a new one, it's like, oh man, I like these characters so much. I don't want to see them die. So that's I think what is something that draws me to the genre, and the ones that I really like is characters that you can care about and they're humanized, and then that there's a threat out there, and so the horror comes from just having to endure maybe something bad happening to them at some point. So
Great point. Great point. Hey, Belle, you want to chime in?
I'll give it a shot. Yeah, I think what I have is probably, probably would be described a little more like a studio comedy, which is not what they do a lot anymore. There used to be sort of that midpoint there, money-wise, but there's a lot of the people who used to do that who just don't do it anymore. But yeah, I mean, to me, what's always appealed is again, like Brian, it's a lot of the movies when I was younger. Certainly a lot of the comedies when I was younger. And I don't think really what I have sort of fits into any sort of hybrid. I think it's more or less, again, a reality-based comedy with, two characters who are kind of like this, but they kind of have to get together to solve something. And I guess the best way you would describe it, it is, like Jesse's, it's a misfit story. It's about a couple of people, and then they end up getting a team together to go look for this person, and they're all a bunch of misfits. But it's the fact that, the misfits actually win in the end. And I think that's a kind of story that, that appeals across, across every group, because everybody feels that way.
Yeah.
Even if you don't think you are, you still feel that way. That's who
Yeah.
you are. It's how you're born.
Yeah.
That's ingrained with you from the age of 11.
I would say we might have a knack for unconventional characters,
Yeah.
and unconventional characters are there's a lot you can do with them.
Yeah, they're fun to write. No, I think all of you hit on the key reasons why we even created this film festival, is because going back, this is our sixth film festival, and I realized that there was not a specific film festival that looked at comedy and horror together, only those two genres. Now there's actually several, and I think it wasn't like that we started a trend. It was just that it just was ripe for that combination, because I think film festivals were trying to be more curated as well and find their niche and their specialty. But I love it, and it only came about because I was not familiar with horror. I was only familiar with comedy. And then I realized horror had so much comedy involved. So that's why I really like the blend. The tension between the two works really well. Brian, you want to close us out?
Oh, I was just agreeing, but
I thought you had sometimes your screen would turn yellow. I thought it meant you were going to say something.
oh no, I think I was just like agreeing and nodding.
Okay, great. You were just nodding enthusiastically that the Zoom picked up the sound. Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much for spending your time with us. Thank you for supporting the Die Laughing Film Festival. And viewers, I hope you enjoyed this glimpse into these screenplays. And if you want to learn more, reach out to our film festival or the writers, and we'll make sure we answer your questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.